Moyer from the Ocean River Institute, and with me today, let's go round robin. Sophie,
Hi, I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts, and my name is Sophie.
Erin,
Hi, I'm Erin McGill, and I'm from Connecticut.
Bob,
I'm Robert Mon. I'm from Westwood, Massachusetts.
and we're talking about the hometowns of Sophie, Erin, and Rob and Bob, and how they play a role in the greater ecosystem, the greater watersheds that they belong to, and what can be done in their own towns that by working very locally, we can make a great difference to the broader watershed, if not the planet and everything beyond that. But let's get right into it. Erin, tell us about your hometown.
Yeah, so as I said, I live in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and it's a suburb just south of Hartford in the middle of the state, and it's located right on the Connecticut River. So Glastonbury historically has a major industry in agriculture, and even today there are a lot of farms and orchards that thrive in my town and grow fresh produce to sell. Apples are one of the most popular crops grown in Glastonbury, and apple orchards take up much of the town's landscape. Orchards and their orchards are just two of the many apple orchards in my town. To prevent pests from invading these apple trees, insecticides are sprayed in the orchards. And after a few hundred years of growing these apple orchards, the soil has been very damaged. Rain causes the chemicals to run off the orchards and into the Connecticut River as well.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I hear there's like mercury and lead and some things used on those pesticides.
Yeah, not good.
Not good. I see driving down along the Connecticut that there's quite a bit of tobacco growing. Have you got tobacco in Glastonbury?
For sure, yeah. Tobacco is another crop that has had its history in Glastonbury. It used to be a major industry, and it even still continues to be grown today. Old tobacco barns still stand and have an important presence in my town. The farms are one of the town's main attractions, and everybody knows somebody who's worked on a tobacco farm.
That's a real agricultural town. It's a lot of residents. But you have residents, and I see that they have a lot of good-looking lawn. They have, lawns around there. And are lawns a concern?
They are. Residents of Glastonbury do like to have their good-looking lawns, but they use excess fertilizers and other synthetic chemicals to aid the growth of their grass. And these chemicals result in pollution, especially in the water from runoff into the river. In the Connecticut River, algal blooms are caused by nutrients from septic and sewage systems, as well as fertilizers used on these residents' lawns. Septic and sewage systems cost money to fix, and fertilizer costs money to purchase. So basically, when chemicals are placed on lawns, residents are basically paying to pollute. The lawns of Glastonbury, though, can be green and healthy without the use of fertilizers. When grass photosynthesizes, it takes in the oxygen and converts it into carbon, and the grass will actually pump this liquid carbon from its root tips. And the carbon feeds the microbes in the soil, like bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi. And the microbes essentially allow nutrients to build up in the soil. So an established lawn should get all of the nutrients that it needs from the soil, just as grasslands have for thousands of years.
That is cool. So the grass plants, and I understand if you walk on the grass or have a picnic or bruise the grass, it's stimulated to photosynthesize more and pull carbon out of the air and turn it into sugars and carbohydrates and stuff, and then pump that liquid carbon out their roots as exudate and feed a soil and the microbes there that'll then in turn feed the grass. So we don't need to put fertilizer, and there's no way that stuff's going to go anywhere but back to the grass. That is really cool. What about herbicides?
Yeah, so a major herbicide that's very well known on the market is called Roundup, and it contains the chemical glyphosate, which has been found to cause cancer in 3 individuals whose families are now receiving millions of dollars from Monsanto. Roundup is also linked to antibiotic resistance and hormone disruption. Glyphosate is found in our food as well, like ice cream and soybeans. the chemical is basically everywhere, and it was even found in 70% of rainfall samples collected in a study. Roundup runs into the Connecticut River when residents place it on their lawns, basically like any other synthetic chemical. And these chemicals will pollute the water, cause health issues, and are just overall not a good thing to have around.
Yeah, Roundup has been around for a while, and the chemical companies found that if it got onto their plants, it would kill the plants. And so they developed genetic modified plants to withstand Roundup. And so now the cattle and dairy cows are eating plants that have been sprayed with Roundup to kill the other plants or something. And the cows end up having the Roundup in their milk. And the brewer making beer gets grains and malts that have Roundup on them, and it ends up in our beer. And unfortunately, it clings to our fat cells, so it can bioaccumulate over time. So yikes. So where does Glastonbury runoff go to?
Yeah, so our watershed is the Connecticut River area. So any stream in Glastonbury drains back out into the Connecticut River. And the river opens up in Long Island Sound and is home to a bunch of different estuaries and coves. The river is a huge moving body of water, so it will carry any pollutant left from Glastonbury into the Sound. And that can be seen when some beaches along the Connecticut shoreline every summer close due to the excess runoff.
Yeah, the XR runoff is carrying nitrogen and nutrients that's feeding the algae. And when the days get longer and the water gets warmer, that algae is hungrier, and the limiting factor is nutrients, and it's chowing down on nutrients. And so we're losing entire oyster beds and clam flats because there's too much blooming algae that's eating up the oxygen and releasing harmful chemicals that we don't want in our seafood. And we don't want our seafood dead by enough. And surprise, surprise, it has to do with how we treat our lawns back upriver in our backyards. That is just phenomenal. And of course, yeah, I mean, we know that the Long Island Sound suffering from warming waters and stuff. So it's really important that people who live in the Long Island Sound watershed, especially, take your recommendations, Erin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Cool place. I'm sorry I don't have time for field trips or photographs and stuff. Bob, talk to me about where your home is. What's that like there?
So I live in Westwood, and Westwood's like a lot of the other suburbs outside of Boston. We lack a large agricultural or manufacturing center, and we're mostly just completely dominated by residential areas. But there are some service industries. There's some shops, some stores, some office buildings, a mall or two, and yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's sort of like Glastonbury. It's residential, and without the tobacco plants, barns and stuff. You've got beautiful lawns like Glastonbury. Should we be concerned about Westwood lawns?
Well, yeah, water pollution and lawn care, they go hand in hand. And Westwood lawns, while they might look strong on the surface, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like completely healthy. A lot of them are heavily fertilized, and heavily fertilized lawns are a major polluter in Westwood. And they create numerous problems for people and nature alike. And the fertilized lawns, they don't absorb rainwater as effectively, and it creates more runoff than to be expected. And the runoff is filled with nitrogen and phosphorus that flows into the water bodies, and it causes the harmful algae blooms. Like they release pretty bad smelling odor. They can kill fish, and they can even animals that go near the water can get poisoned, essentially creating these large dead zones. And what should be a rather beautiful town can unfortunately see these like massive scale deaths of animals, and it's rather sad and not very becoming of our town.
No, yikes. Yeah, I've in the Mystic River we had a whole bunch of menhaden just belly up and die. They were being chased by striped bass, and so they all turned up dead because of the harmful algal bloom eating up the oxygen. So, and there's been a case of 2 dogs running into harmful algal blooms and dying from the toxins that are released by those algae and stuff. So that was like down south in the Carolinas or something. But still, this is a big concern, is to cut back on nutrient pollution. Nitrogen pollution is undoubtedly the greatest pollutant of oceans. because of the creating ocean dead zones. And you've got a lot of car traffic there in Westwood. That can't be good for the environment.
Yeah, because Westwood is home to 109, and it's a really important corridor for towns west of Westwood to access I-95 and get to Boston. So, I mean, any given day, there's thousands of cars passing through, and those cars, they're a large polluter, and they have two forms of pollution that come from them. There's chemicals from the physical car, and also the air pollution they emit from their exhaust. So when the car naturally wears down due to rain, due to just the process of time, the pieces of the tires, the paints, the metal starts to wear down, and when they start to wear down, they release toxic substances like lead, mercury, and even some soot from the tires. And when it rains, the pollutants the particle pollutants, they get caught in the runoff and they flow into the water bodies. And lead and mercury.
Yeah, it's a real malls and parking lot areas because your brake and your whole of the tires have to do with the fact that the rubber comes off and that so it grips so well. But then you end up with this lead and mercury containing bits of rubber getting there, and then it's so important to treat the runoff from parking lots and not just send it to the river because there's really nasty stuff in there. So yeah, where does that runoff go? Speaking of which,
So
in your town, yeah.
So yeah, there's a few important water bodies in Westwood. There's the Charles River to the north, and then the Neponset River, which covers most of the east side of it. So most of the water does eventually flow to the Neponset or Charles River, namely the Neponset, just due to the fact that more of the town is in there. There's also a bunch of wetlands like Rock Meadow Brook, and the wetlands are especially in danger because they tend to be closer to the roads and they tend to be closer to homes, and because they get the double bearing of pollution. But it's a tragedy because the wetlands tend to be the ones with the most biodiversity. There's great blue herons, painted turtles, and even deer, and they all require clean water to grow healthy and strong. And unfortunately, if the water becomes polluted, they can't survive. They can't survive very well in those kinds of polluted environments.
No, we're having trouble in New Hampshire with the loons getting too much lead in the lakes, that gone to the waters there. And of course, when we want to be able to go down to the river and catch fish for dinner or something. And around here, we have to worry about these pollutants that are in the natural fish and the brook trout that are swimming around these rivers. Neponset's cool because it's got brook trout, unlike the Charles River. So how can we use lawns to help with water management?
So natural lawns are better suited to protecting the local ecosystems. And this is because natural lawns, they have deeper and stronger grass roots, they have more microbial life, and they absorb more water than their artificial counterparts. The artificial lawns, they don't need to grow deeper roots, and their microbial life is killed off when Roundup is applied. And when the polluted runoff from the streets, like it gets to people's lawns, the artificial lawns kind of compound the issue of runoff because they don't absorb the water. Instead, the runoff goes over the lawn and it picks up pollutants from the fertilizer, brings it along to the river, essentially creating a cocktail of toxins for the local environment. And so really the best way to prevent pollution in the town is to use natural lawns, and it will essentially solve two problems with one solution.
Right. And the two problems are?
The two problems are, of course, pollution from cars and pollutions from fertilizer. And
right, because you've got the buffering of the lawns and stuff. So this is really good that we are further protecting the waterways. Thank you, Bob. That's really interesting. I wish I was out there looking for those great blue herons and stuff. Sophie, let's move over to you and tell us about where your domicile is and what's the watershed we're talking about here.
So we are talking about the Blackstone River Canal, which runs between Worcester and Providence. Worcester grew into a hub for industry, and it's most known for its textile mills, transportation, and wire industry. So this Blackstone River Canal is used to transport raw products in its history and also create energy for the city.
Yeah.
And currently, Worcester is still a big center for transportation. There's a lot of trains that run between Worcester and Providence, and also Worcester and Boston. And there's still a lot of people working in manufacturing in Worcester, about 10,000, producing things like textile still, and still steel and wire goods, leather, all kinds of things.
All kinds of things. It's a real, hub of activity for Massachusetts. I'm glad you're with us today. Tell us about, so with all those industries, there's probably some left behind residues from the industries that are no longer there.
Yeah, so these are called brownfield sites, and these are sites that were heavily contaminated, and they're in the process of remediation. And common types of contamination that we find at these sites are arsenic, hydrocarbons, gasoline, waste oil, and other types too. And usually there's a combination of a few of these. And even every brownfield site does still affect the surrounding areas, because these chemicals do leach into the soil and the waterways.
Bad news when it leaches through. And then you've got a lot of residents who have their own lawns and stuff. And is that an issue?
Yeah, a lot of residents in Worcester use fertilizers. So there's nutrient loadings that run into the waterways here, and it causes an overabundance of algae and aquatic plants. And it contributes to a decline in water quality overall, which affects the aquatic life, and also can affect human activities like fishing and swimming. And also but are used to kill weeds, and Roundup, as we talked about, is particularly harmful. But you can substitute Roundup for other natural and non-hazardous products.
Yeah, that's right. If you can look at the label in the store, and there are also, you can take a gallon of white vinegar and a cup of salt and a tablespoon of dish soap and put those into a squirt bottle, and you can go out and have at the dandelions and stuff. But it's the Roundup, it kills the thing in the tracks, but then people are apt to go use it on their lawn, not just in the cracks of cement or something. You don't want to use it on a lawn, because the Roundup, the glyphosate, will go beyond that plant and drip down into the soil below and kill a quarter of the mycelium fungi that are connecting the plant roots to the bacteria that are feeding it and stuff. So please, and Roundup and the glyphosate lasts forever in your body cells. This is why a groundskeeper has died from Hopkinson because of that, and two others have been found that that's the cause, and Monsanto's now paying millions of dollars for their repairs and stuff. So moving to a nicer topic, I hear that Worcester has a good composting program.
It does. It actually has the largest municipal composting program in the entire state. And it, it collects leaf and yard cuttings. So it's both a drop-off and a pickup center. So the city creates compost from these leaf and yard cuttings. And then anybody for free can just pick up compost. There's no limit to how much you can take, and add it to your soil. And it's a really good source of just nutrients, and it will really help your lawn grow strong and reduce plant stress, and also build root structure, as we were talking about, and just fend off against weeds. Right.
So when you're raking the leaves up, don't put them in the waterways, because that's adding nutrients to the waterways. Instead, put it in a bag or put it here and take them down. Pick them up.
I think occasionally the city does pick up leaf and yard cuttings, but I don't think it's every day. So
no.
Yeah, so you can just drop it off. I also know that twice a year, Worcester actually has free events to drop off hazardous products. So take advantage of those days.
Those are really important. So if you have something that you think is hazardous, put it aside and stay tuned for those opportunities to do the collections and stuff. In Somerville, we have to bring our driver's license because we do it at least once a month. And Cambridge doesn't do it so often, so everyone from Cambridge is trying to dump their toxins in Somerville. And so we say, no, no, just the local ones and stuff. So, but watch out in Worcester. That's really important. If you don't want to eat it, don't pour it in the ground. And this, let's wrap this up, Sophie. So in conclusion.
As we were talking about, don't use herbicides, especially Roundup. Roundup is particularly harmful to the soil and our health, and really try to cut down on fertilizer. If possible, don't use fertilizer, use organic products like compost, and that'll do the best to make sure that your soil is healthy and your grass is growing strong, especially for the long term. So another thing we can do is just urge our local governments to participate in the Brownfields program and spend more resources on it and clean contaminated areas.
Yeah, that's really important, that the government has to decide how it's going to spend money. And it's important they don't put off the housekeeping of addressing these brownfields throughout Massachusetts. We're talking state money and federal money, and they tend to match each other, so they have to be, local communities have to campaign to get those done. Sophie, thank you. It's really interesting learning about such different places between the three of you. This has been really interesting. And we're doing all this because the Ocean River Institute is having a campaign to have people of communities pledge not to fertilize their lawns. And if the lawns look hungry, or if you're wondering about transferring away from that, there is now slow release nitrogen, which are little capsules of nitrogen and phosphorus that are coated so that they dissolve slowly over time and can last your lawn, feed your lawn over, say, 6 months. When it's cold, too cold or too dry, it doesn't do any feeding, nor does your grass do any growing. So that's an option that is a recent development. So it isn't like, oh, woe is me, I've been totally snookered in using all this quick release. You can use a 1/2 pound per 1,000 square feet of slow release. In the fall's the best, but if you miss it in the spring, that's, because the stuff doesn't wash away. So that's important. And what we're finding is that the higher percentage of people in a community spreading the word out starts to make a big difference in how it affects reducing pollution. But more importantly, it tells the politicians and decision makers on Beacon Hill that maybe we should not be putting so much synthetic fertilizer down. And they can't do anything about it. It's only the governor who can back off and say, just use slow release and for your yards and stuff, and don't use Roundup. Already the Department of Agriculture says you only need a 1/2 pound of slow release. You don't need the fast release, and so that's there. But yeah, so to learn more about our campaign, please go to www.oceanriver.org. Join us, and you can sign up for our e-alerts that we send out when we got something to talk about, like sending out this broadcast. And we'd really welcome not only you participating with us by signing the pledge, but by taking a moment and writing a comment about why this is important to you, why you care about that, you do care about your lawn, and that you want to have green grass and clean waters. Because it means a lot to decision makers not to hear something repeated over and over, but to hear personally how it works for you and stuff, how we're able to save money by not buying the stuff and have greener lawns and stuff. Erin and Bob and Sophie, I want to thank you all for Well, maybe you want, we got like a minute. Well, we got 10 seconds left. Thanks a lot, guys, for participating in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I invite you all to come join us, oceanriver.org. Thanks a lot for listening, and try to take care of first yourself, and then try to take a little care of your yard and this planet of ours. Thanks a lot.